operating system. That means you have to get a whole new computer and learn a whole new software, and you've got to find a way to transfer all your files. We've kind of gone through that here's church. That change isn't easy, but it wouldn't work if we had to suddenly change from gas to electric cars. It wouldn't work to just keep the old car that you have or the old computer you have and just make small changes, would it? You would have to make a new change entirely. Some of us have gone through this with health. If you've had a heart issue or a diabetic issue, the doctor may come to you and say, you have to totally change, probably not just your diet, but how you live. You're going to be easy. Maybe some of the favorite foods that you've enjoyed, you can't eat anymore, eat less of. Your schedule may have to change. The way you sleep, the way you go throughout your day may have to change. And that change is not easy. And you probably couldn't look at the doctor and say, well, can I just eat everything I've been eating and maybe just have an apple every once in a while? No, you can't keep your old habits and your old schedule and your old lifestyle and just make different tweaks or different. For any of those things, that change would be revolutionary. And when Paul talks about Jesus, the new life is Jesus, we had this verse last week in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Paul says we have a new life that comes in Jesus. The old has gone and the new has come. It's a revolutionary change. When Jesus changes us, we can't keep our old lifestyle and habits and different things and keep everything just the way it was and then just say, well, I'll just attend church every Sunday, or I'll pray every once in a while, or I'll read my Bible from time to time. That's not the major change that Jesus is talking about when he comes and says, I have a new life for you when you become a Christian. It's a revolutionary change. And we talk a lot about these kind of changes all over the Bible. And one of the best places I want to look at is in Romans 12, 1 and 2, because we're going to talk about bringing about change in the way that we think about our lives. And Romans 12, 1 and 2 says, and so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because all he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing. Everybody say change. Changing the way that you think. Then you will learn to know that God's will is for you, which is good, pleasing, and perfect. Now, in God's word, it says, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world. How many of you have a translation that says, don't copy the behaviors and customs of this present age? Some translations have that way, and that's probably one of the best ways to translate it, because Jewish thinking, they divided time kind of into two places, in a lot of ways that we do as Christians. They talked about this present age, which had its own problems and challenges with the Roman Empire, and what people worshipped and the messages that people had about the Roman Empire and where the world rules and riches rule and power rule. So Paul would always say there is this age and then there is the age to come. Now, the way we might think is we're living in this world and then there'll be our life in heaven. So our life here and our life later, which is not quite how the Jews would think of it, and not quite the message that Paul was bringing forth, okay? That there is the age of the world and its kingdom and its rule, and then there is the age of Jesus and the new kingdom and its rule, okay? And Paul's message would always be the old age is gone, and not that the new age is coming, but the new age has come through Jesus Christ. In other words, now is the time that you can begin to change. Our message and my message and your Bible studies have never been, just tough it out now because we're all going to change later in heaven. Change your behavior later in heaven. Change your attitude later in heaven. Change your life later in heaven. No, that's never been the message. You know, we have this age with all the different worlds and its powers, but a new age has come through Jesus Christ. And now you can begin to change and think differently and live differently. And all the different fruit of the Spirit that we talked about last week is available to you, not in heaven, but it will be there in heaven, but it's also, but its availability begins when? Now. Now the present age, the new age has begun. And the new age is here, and the old age is shifting out, and now everything can begin to change. You find this echoed through Romans, through Corinthians, through Jesus. Just the whole message of the old is gone, the new has come, and it's come now. It'll be perfected and completed and finished in heaven, but the time to change, and you can begin to experience things of heaven right now. And there are ways to have revolutionary change in your life right now. And Paul says it begins in the way that we think. And that change comes now, the illustration comes now. And this should be a radical change. Now, we can't just make minor changes upon our old lifestyle. Paul kind of says you have to choose in which age you want to think and live in. And you can't just make, the new age isn't just small and new tweaks. And Jesus illustrates this so well and matches what he and Paul are both saying in the famous saying in Luke chapter 5. If you want to join with me in Luke chapter 5, look at verses 37 through 39 in Luke chapter 5. Jesus says this. You may remember this one. He says, "No one puts new wine in old wineskins." He says, "For the new wine would burst the wineskins." The old wineskins were stretched and rigid, and the new wine would literally break it apart. Okay? And here's one that maybe a little more fashionable. He says, "No one who drinks the old wine seems to want the new wine. The old is just fine," they say. And Jesus would also talk about, if you go back to verse 36, he says, Jesus also gave them this illustration. "No one tears a piece of cloth from a new garment and uses it to patch an old garment. For then the new garment would be ruined, and the new patch wouldn't even match the old garment." Now, I'm not a fabrics person, okay? But usually what I've been told is the old garment is already shrunk and adjusted. And if you put a new patch on there, it'll shrink and just tear away from the old garment. You can't put new things on the old. If your new system says, you know, this computer won't feature this software anymore, you can't buy a new software and put it in an old computer. You've got to get a whole new computer system to back up what you have. If my car is going kaput, and of course that's the frustration. My daughter's got a car on the shop for 3 weeks because of all these new computers and things, right? But if your old car is broken down, you can't put new computer parts in it. You have to get pretty much a what? A whole new car. You know, like I said, if you have to have a new diet, you can't just say, well, I'm going to keep my old. Like I said before, you have to have a whole new diet. Jesus says, you know, if you're living in a new age, you have to go. It's a complete radical change. You can't just take little bits and pieces of the Bible. You can't just take little bits and pieces of my teaching and patch it over the old way you used to live. No, it's a revolutionary change where you have to take everything in. And again, I think Paul says the way we can make that change is the way we think. So if we enter into the new year and trying to make a total, complete new change, we're not just making little patches in 2025. They're just going to tear off and not work. It's a total, complete renewing of our lives. And that's what we want, because every time you meet somebody, I remember Pastor Keith Stanford used to say this, and I've said it here many times. You know, if you ask somebody how they're doing, how's it going? It's going great. Well, what's going on? Well, you know, same old, same old. Have you heard that before when you're asking somebody how they're doing? How you doing? This the same old, same old. Well, our lives tend to be the same old, unless Paul says we renew our mind in the way we think. So I feel like I'm kind of getting scatterbrained this morning, but to kind of bring us into focus, God calls us to a complete and major new change in our life because a new age has come. And what's kind of the gateway? What's kind of the doorway once we receive Jesus Christ as our lives? Paul says, renew your minds, change yourself by the way that you think. So that's the challenge this morning. How can we begin to change ways that we think that would bring about the new kind of change that Jesus talks about? What are some ways that we think that can bring about new, total ways of living our life in this present age? Now, Paul says whenever you're changing the way of thinking and you're renewing your mind, you are presenting yourself as a living sacrifice. That's difficult. Living sacrifice is kind of a challenging word. Anytime you sacrifice something, it costs something of you. It's something that you wouldn't normally feel comfortable doing. So changing the way that we think, we'll have to be intentional. We'll have to be willing to do some hard work. But I thought of like 4 ways that we kind of pulled from this. And I just want to look at it. And if we look back at Romans chapter 12, here's 4 things I think we can do this year to change the way that we think. And the first thing I think you find in chapter 2, it says, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way that you think. Paul says, how you think depends on who you're trying to please. A lot of us, your behavior this week, what you did and didn't do, was probably dependent upon the weather. Okay? And a lot of where you did and didn't go, you had anxieties about the weather. We've got anxieties, people coming out here last week, so we kind of shifted accordingly. Our anxieties of what the weather is going to do and how we're feeling determine where we go and when we stayed in. And I don't think anybody, especially last Sunday, were that anxious to get out and drive around because there was concern of that weather. And even the concerns that were there Friday. Some of you shifted those anxieties. I'm worried about the weather. I'm worried about things. But, I've got a responsibility to sing at the funeral. So, a lot of what you did depended on where your anxieties and where they were. Okay? And Paul says a lot of what we do depends on who we're worried about disappointing. If you're worried about disappointing the world, man, I may not be that successful according to the world. There are certain expectations I think people have around from me. I want to be able to please my boss. I don't want my kids to be disappointed in me. I don't want my wife to be disappointed in me. I don't want the world to be disappointed in me as they look at me in my car, in my house. And so that kind of anxiety leads to how the way you think about how you're perceived by the world will affect your behavior. Okay? If you think that people are watching your appearance, it might change the kind of clothes that you buy. Okay? If you think that your family is getting on your case about your health, it might affect the food that you eat. As a matter of fact, sometimes our diet and our daily habits, I've seen, can be more influenced by what our family thinks of us even than our concern for our own health, our own habits, because we're worried about how they see us or what they might say or what they might do. What we worry about or what we're concerned about and how we think people see us. But here, if you continue to put your thoughts on how the world is in this age, Paul says, it's kind of like a software operating system that gets ingrained in our brain. We're going to be gearing ourselves. We got to keep doing whatever makes us feel happy and successful based on the world. We're going to do everything that's comfortable to us. We're going to do things where we perceive that everybody is happy around us. And we're going to do things where we may not be happy unless we consume different products, And so Paul is saying, if your mindset is in this present age, then that's who you're going to work to please. That's who you're going to work. So I got to make everybody else happy. I got to make myself happy. I got to make sure everything moves smoothly. I got to make sure that I'm comfortable. I got to make sure that I'm successful. That's the way this present age is, and it's just ingrained into our software, into our brain. And it was that true thousands of years ago, and it's true today. Paul says we've got to rewire our brain to different software to where it's not, how do I please the world of this present day, to how do I please Him? You've got to renew your thinking to where you're not conforming to please the world, but Paul says, but you're in your mind going, how do I please God? So the question is, who are you trying to please first in your life this year? The world and how it operates in this system and mind frame that we're in, or God Himself? Proverbs says that wisdom begins when we begin to fear the Lord. And again, it's that mindset that I really want to please God. And my anxiety, my fear is, am I really doing enough for Him? And fear is kind of a strange word, but I would retranslate it this way. The wisdom begins when you're concerned about, am I doing what God wants me to do? That's how I'd retranslate that verse. Because most of the time, we're concerned about other things. I'm concerned about where our finances are going to be straight. I'm concerned about what my family thinks of me. I'm concerned about my success level. I'm concerned about my public image. There's many things that we're, quote unquote, fearful of in our life, and that motivates our actions. But Paul, the psalmist and Proverbs and everyone in the Bible saying, is there any concern to God? Where are you? Where am I at in terms of you? And are you speaking to me? And I'm seeking you. And what would it mean if very first and foremost this year, our mindset, our concern, our new way of thinking is not how am I doing in this world system, but God, in this new age, in this new kingdom, am I thinking of you first? And what does that mean? How would my life live differently if I meant to please you, even over my own family or my own needs or my own... God, what is it to put my mind at you first? Okay? And it's really hard to put God on your mind first when there's a lot of clutter and different things going on in our lives. So that kind of leads to my second point. So if you want to renew your thinking, I think the first thing we have to do is acknowledge that, you know, there are two different ages that are always fighting in us. It's the new age it's the old age and the ways of the world that we're in, and the new age that has come with Jesus. And it comes with a decision. Because if you don't make a conscious decision, if you don't plan for it, if you don't pray about it, if you don't intend to do it, if you're not a purposeful, saying, I must please God first, this is what you need to know. And I think what we all know is that if we don't make a conscious decision to do it, our automatic default thinking goes to what? This present age. You have to kind of jolt yourself out of that. Because if you don't, your brain, your body, it's a default system. It will go right back to this world and what's it doing. So we have to kind of say, this year, in 2025, I want